Hello, 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 everyone, and welcome to episode 16 of Survivor Strong, the podcast where we talk about all things related to childhood trauma. I'm Yvonne Sandomir. Tonight, my Survivor Secrets guest is Carolyn Lemon Larson, and she's a survivor of multiple traumas, both in childhood and adult. Um, and Carolyn courageously reached out to me because she's decided that now is the time to share her harrowing story of survival publicly for the very first time. So, Carolyn, welcome to Survivor Strong. It really is a privilege to have you here with me. Before we begin, I have to ask you, how are you feeling about being here right now?
Oh, thank you, Yvonne. I want to say that I am nervous. I hope everybody can understand. I have been nervous for a few days now, knowing this was approaching. And I appreciate you sending me your very thoughtful list of questions so that I could have plenty of time to write up my answers. And if I guess y'all can't see me, but I was going to say if y'all see me looking down at my notes, then I hope y'all can understand that too.
We understand, absolutely. So you had mentioned to me that you really like to start with a prayer just to kind of ground yourself.
Yes.
And since we did have those little bit of technical difficulties, which I know you weren't expecting, why don't we do that now so you can kind of ground yourself and find
Okay.
a safe space for you to be in while we talk about this? Okay?
Okay, sure. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this opportunity for me to share my story. I thank you for Yvonne and her inviting me to her podcast. And Father, I pray that you would bless the people that are hearing this podcast. And Father, I pray that other people would be able to come forward who might have been through similar things in their past. And I just thank you and praise you for all your many blessings. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. And let everybody else say amen. I could hear it. I know everybody out there said it with us. So that was beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And as I said at the outset, you're a survivor of multiple traumas, and it's happened throughout your life. Where would you really like to begin? I mean, I find that it's best to start from the beginning personally, but
Right.
it's up to you. So where would you like to start?
Okay. Well, I have been going through your list of questions. I wrote them all down on a different page for each question in my journal. And I'll be honest, my mind is a little fragmented sometimes.
Okay.
So on some pages, I might repeat myself from a previous page. I apologize. I may not even realize it when I'm doing it.
No worries.
But I'd like to just start with, your list of questions from beginning to end, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's perfect. So, I'll start by saying you revealed to me that you lost your father. You lost your father when you were very young, and you ended up in the care of an uncle who subsequently abused you. He was supposed to be your father figure. That had to be very confusing to you as a child. I mean, how did that all come to be? How old were you when you lost your dad?
Okay. Well, my answer I wrote out here. Forgive me if I tend to read more than I just spontaneously talk.
That's okay.
But at least to start out with, I'm going to read a little bit. So here's my answer I wrote out.
Perfect.
I said yes. Very confusing. He hid behind two different religions to pretend like he was someone he was not. One of those religions was an independent Baptist church. The other was the religion of Santeria, which sacrificed animals. And as a result, I have a fear of poisoning people, as well as always feeling the shame of this idea that everything in my house is poisonous to other people. It also causes me to feel uncomfortable eating with other people in a restaurant or at their home, etc.
Wow. So your fear right now, you still have a fear of poisoning people? Can you get into that a little bit? Why you fear that?
Um, it's a little hard to explain, but I just always feel like that I might accidentally use some ingredients that are not are expired or something similar to that. And also, I want to say that I have done a lot of family research. I like to do genealogy. I have studied the family tree of my uncle who abused me. He was my uncle by marriage. And I came to find out that when he was 5 years old, he lost his mother. And I don't have this in my notes.
That's okay. That's okay.
Anyway, his mother died from from typhoid. That's what it was. His mother died from typhoid, and his brother also within a couple of months of each other.
Wow.
So this typhoid, he was born in 1900. Okay, so this typhoid was going around the country up there. He was born in Wisconsin. So after his mother and his brother died, he had several siblings. In addition to that brother that died, his father sent him and his sister to live with an aunt in New York. And somehow I just think that part of my fear of poisoning people could have to do with the typhoid situation, even though that was before I was ever born, many years. But I don't know if anyone is familiar with the story of Typhoid Mary.
No.
But
No.
she was a lady, there's been a movie about her and a book and everything. She was a lady who went around working for people as a maid and spreading the typhoid disease. And she was a carrier and never realized that she had typhoid.
Oh, wow.
And so I guess some of my fears are tied in with, some of that.
Sure. And so it sounds like that experience of that, the two different religions with your uncle, something about that stirs up this anxiety within you.
Yes.
Of this irrational fear. And that's really a negative after effect from the trauma that you've endured. So, was your mom ever romantically involved with your uncle at any point? I mean, how did you end up in his care?
Okay, let me say something here. Okay, I'm sorry. I was thinking there was another question. I was trying to really go in chronological order so I didn't get mixed up, but yes, that is your next question on my list. Okay, so this is what I wrote. Forgive me again.
Don't worry.
Maybe after I get warmed up a little bit, maybe I can talk more spontaneously.
Yeah,
right
exactly.
now I'm reading.
Perfect.
Okay, so I said, no, my uncle was my uncle by marriage. He was married to my aunt, who was my mom's sister. My mom was very active in Christian churches her entire life, and she was a firm believer in the seventh commandment from the Protestant Bible, thou shalt not commit adultery. But her sister, Ida, met Milton, my uncle, and started dating him while he was still married to his first wife, Mary. I never met Mary, but at the time of Milton's funeral, I was in my body cast from scoliosis at age 15 and mostly still bedridden. One of my cousins who had a newborn baby stayed with me at his house. There was a lady named Mary who called during the funeral. I answered the phone and she asked for my Uncle Milton. She just said, "Can I speak to Milton?" And I said, "I'm sorry, but he passed away. They're having his funeral right now." And she burst into tears and hung up the phone. And it wasn't until just recently that I found out his first wife's name was Mary through going through my genealogy records and doing a lot of research. So I'm not sure if that's the same Mary, but it could be.
Okay, that's interesting. So there was really no romantic relationship. It was just more of he was part of the same religion that your mom was, kind of part of the community. And when your dad passed, how old were you when your dad passed?
I was 2 years old.
2, that's right.
Okay, Actually, okay, my mom grew up in a Baptist church, and she was not Baptist at the time that I was born. She was Methodist because my father was Methodist, but my mother came from a long line of Baptist people, and so yeah, she. I think my uncle Milton probably found this independent Baptist church that he thought would be a good facade or mask that he could wear to make people think that he was pretty much like the rest of the family. If that makes sense.
Oh, it totally does. Yeah, no, it totally does. That's what predators do. They intertwine themselves in the community and with families to manipulate them into thinking that they can trust them with their children. That's exactly what they do. So it's not uncommon at all. And I don't recall, how did your father pass away?
He was killed in a electrical accident at our house.
Oh.
He was trying to install another electrical outlet that they needed, and the drill had a short in it, a frayed wire, and it electrocuted him.
Wow, that's so tragic. And for you,
Yes.
such a young age, and I'm so sorry for that.
Thank you.
I can't imagine what that was like. But once you got into the care of Milton, your uncle, can you tell us, how did the abuse begin? What I mean by that is, do you recall how he groomed you? Do you recall how long it took for him to, from the point of grooming to attacking you? How did it all start?
Okay. So here's what I have written. I'm going to read it.
That's perfectly fine.
I appreciate you bearing with me with that. Okay, so I said, my mom felt totally overwhelmed with trying to raise me and my three sisters after my father's death. I was the youngest of four girls. I was sent to my uncle's house, Milton, possibly that same night that my father died. They lived in a 2-bedroom house. He slept in one bedroom, and my aunt slept in the other bedroom. I was always told to sleep in his bed with him, meaning Milton. And he always slept with a gun under his pillow. I was always told that he would kill my mother, and then I would have to go live with him if I ever told anyone. My mom was constantly in the hospital after my dad died, and she worked also. She had a lot of health problems. I do not remember his first attack, but it was all very covert, hidden, secretive, all those kind of things.
Keeping secrets. And was your aunt aware that you were staying in his bedroom?
She had to be.
She had to be.
Yeah,
right.
I don't have real clear memories, but she absolutely had to be when I think back on it.
And what?
I think that most of the night I would try to sleep on his floor next to the bed so that I could try to protect myself as much as possible from his gun in case it would accidentally go off or anything like that.
That's another fear factor right there, fear tactic that they use, that perpetrators use. If you tell anybody will hurt your family, look at this, I've got a gun right here. If that's not a threat, I don't know what is.
Exactly.
And how old were you when this began?
I was 2 years old. I firmly believe, like I said,
it started right away.
It may have been the same night that my father died.
Yeah. Wow. And do you have, and not that this changes the validity of your story in any way, shape, or form, but do you have specific flashbacks to that time? Because I know for me,
I do.
Yeah, same. That's the same for me. Like, I can't remember, but there are certain flashes from 2.5 to 3 years old that it's like, no, this definitely happened. I can't give you specifics, but I know this happened. So I was just curious if it was the same for you.
My very, very first memory in life is when I was laying on my parents' bed, I had just taken an afternoon nap, and I was waking up, and there were people in our house, neighbors and so forth, that were crying and screaming because my dad had just died very suddenly. And I had no idea what was going on. Nobody would really talk to me. So that was traumatic. And
No one would talk to you?
Well, not really. They were too busy crying and,
Oh,
crying
so
on each other's shoulders and things like
I
that.
see. So instead of tending to the children who may have needed to be taken care of, they were taking care of their own needs at that time because they were grieving.
That's the way I remember it. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. And so, did your mom ever suspect anything? I mean, did she ever have any signs or did she ever ask you about anything?
Okay. Here is what I wrote to that question. I said, if she did, I never knew it. My daughter says that she thinks my family was just naive back then, my adult daughter. I don't know. One person said that basically all men supposedly committed adultery back then. Basically, not every single one, but a good majority, according to this person. But that apparently no one thought that my Uncle Milton would stoop so low as to molest children, not to mention what he did to animals. And his Santeria involvement was very covert and hidden, except to his wife, Ida. She obviously knew that I was sleeping in his bed with him, and she owned several fancy dresses that the Santeria cult has the women wear for various ceremonies.
Wow. I have so many questions about that a little later on. I mean, that's a fascinating piece of your story.
Yeah.
And so, but your mom never asked anything. So, how long did it take for you to disclose the abuse? How old do you think you were when you finally said, hey, this is happening to me?
It was when I was about 32.
32 years old.
Yes.
And how long did the abuse happen?
It went on for 12 years, from I believe ages 2 to age 14.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Let me read this answer that I had written down.
Sure.
I kind of
Sure.
skipped over that. I
Yeah.
said, yeah, as far as when I disclosed the abuse, I said I was about age 32 when I told my sisters and my mom for the first time. I don't remember exactly what I said, but I waited until they were both deceased, talking about my Uncle Milton and Aunt Ida.
Yes, yes.
My mom's response was, well, that BASTARD.
Oh,
It's a good thing he's not still alive, she said.
who
She
said
went
that? Your
on,
mom?
yes. She went on to say that after my dad's death, my uncle told her, oh, don't worry about Carolyn. We'll take good care of her.
Oh. And she believed it because why wouldn't she? You know, she, he'd already manipulated her into believing that she could trust him. And with the devastation of losing your dad, your mom must have been in a difficult position. But I just need to say that even with that difficult spot that she was in, you were her main priority. And you should have been at that time. And she should have known what was going on. How is it possible that she didn't for all of those years? Right? And
I don't know. I am kind of stuck on that right now, to be honest. I am very
yeah,
emotionally stuck on that.
yeah, I can understand that for sure. And so basically, you told your mom her reaction was that bastard. How dare he? If he was alive, I'd kill him myself. Basically, but did you feel supported by your family? Did they say, well, let's go get counseling? Let's talk about this? What was.
Okay. Let me back up for 1 second. If it's okay, I want to read what I wrote for the one before that.
Sure.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to match up with you, but
It's okay.
bear with me here.
Yes,
Okay.
of course.
So I said, my mom was diagnosed with cancer about 9 years after I told her about the abuse, and died from that cancer about 13 years later. One of her nurses in the hospital told us that when she was first diagnosed, that a lot of times people go through something extremely stressful and then later develop cancer. I know that me revealing that trauma story was not her only stressor in her life. I know she had other stressors, but I just kind of have to wonder sometimes if that couldn't have been a factor.
Oh, Carolyn.
And I also said,
I have to stop you right there. I have to stop you right there for a second. There's nothing that you could have said to your mom that would cause her cancer. I hope that you can release that, because that's out of everybody's control, right? I mean,
right.
Cancer is a horrendous thing, and I don't want you for a second to look at yourself in the mirror and say, because I told my mom that I'd been molested by my uncle for 12 years, that is a factor that caused her to have cancer. So I want you to please try to reframe that thought if you can.
Okay, I will work on that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, and then I said, I guess I told her about a year after my stepfather had died in his sleep in their bed. My stepfather was a wonderful man. He was nothing like my uncle.
That's amazing. I love to hear that you did eventually, find, or your mom found someone that loved you and was the father that you really deserved.
Right.
And I had to ask you, so you told them after he had passed away, so clearly no charges were ever filed, right? You didn't file any charges. And you didn't receive any therapy at the time of disclosure, right?
Yeah. Let me back up for just a minute. I'm elaborating on things, and I'm skipping what I wrote. If you don't mind, I'd like
Not
to read
at
what
all.
I wrote. Okay. So you had asked, did you feel supported by your family? Here's what I wrote. I said, by one sister, yes, and by my mom, the best she knew how. Back then, counseling was extremely rare, so she was never able to grieve properly over my father's death. Actually, my mom, my sisters, and I were never able to grieve his death at the time either. Okay?
Yes.
Counseling was just very rare back then.
Yeah.
And I'm thankful that it's not that way anymore.
Yes. So you really don't think that you properly grieved your dad either?
No, I feel like I'm still grieving him to this day.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine. Okay.
I'm sorry.
No, go on with your next, because I don't want you to lose your spot.
I was just going to read what I wrote for the next question. But
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. The question was, were charges ever filed against Milton? I said, no, not at all. He kept a gun under his pillow, like I mentioned earlier, and threatened to kill my mom if I ever told on him. And he said that I would have to go live with him. Since I was told that since age 2, I believed him.
Yeah, why wouldn't you?
Right.
Everything that he had said happened. He has a gun. You're staying in his room. You can't tell your parents. Wow.
Right.
Did you want to read another one that you had written down, or did you get caught?
I think I'm ready to go on to the next one that you probably have on your list.
Okay. Okay, perfect. So we said that, because therapy was, it's just rare back then. What, if anything, could your mom have done better then? What are some things you wish she had done differently?
Well, here's what I wrote. I kind of had a hard time answering that question because I just wasn't sure what to say, but what I wrote down is I disclosed to her at about age 32. I was seeing the hypnotherapist, and I will talk about him in a little bit here.
Yes.
At that time, I just wish that counseling and awareness would have been more common back then as it is now.
Right. Because that would have made a huge difference.
Right.
A huge difference in your life.
You know, back then we didn't have counselors in the schools. We didn't have any of that people have nowadays.
Yeah, and due to his threats, you were just terrified to tell anyone because you were afraid of what he would do, which is completely understandable. And, that was how you survived. You survived by keeping the secret, because if you didn't know what could happen. You knew that your father died, that adults can just die. You knew that already. So it wasn't too far from your mind, I can imagine.
Right.
And you brought it up a little bit earlier, and I have to say my jaw dropped when I read about the Santeria religion, and this is the same uncle that sexually abused you, right? The same uncle. I just wanted to make sure. Yeah. Wow. How did he broach this subject with you, and how did he get you into this religion?
Okay. Here again, let me go back and read what I wrote for the last question.
Of course.
So what I wrote for the last question, which was, how did he get me mixed up in the Santeria religion? And was it the same person as the uncle that sexually abused me? I said, yes, absolutely. He also hid behind the independent Baptist religion as well. He was quite the con artist. My mom did not allow us to go to his Baptist church with him. They were known at that church to tell people, including young children, that they would go to hell if they were not Baptists.
Wow. Okay. That's confusing.
Yeah.
And so how did he broach this subject with you to get you involved?
Okay. Here's what I wrote for that. I said he did not. He and my aunt were involved in it many years before I was born. They were 50 and 60 years older than me. He was 10 years older than her. He worked as a security guard at the large multi-floor building where the cult met. His employer also offered ballet lessons to young girls. I was enrolled in the ballet lessons from ages 4 to 6, which he helped me get into, and I actually enjoyed them. But I'm starting to think that the ballet lessons were actually part of a grooming process, which would transition me into the whole Santeria cult with its dancing rituals and all of the horrible things that went along with it.
Carolyn, you hit the nail on the head with that. I wrote down ballet lessons just as soon as you said it, because that was absolutely part of the grooming process. 1,000%. And not to mention that skill that he paid for was then used to do these dances as part of this religion. It's connected, and nothing happened during those ballet classes. Those were just normal ballet classes that he just brought you to, or was it just, or were they all involved?
They were normal ballet classes, but I was told that I needed to stay at work with him before and after the ballet lessons while my mom was working or in the hospital. So I don't quite remember if I ran around all day in my little, tutu or whatever it was. But yeah, I can remember staying with him until 5 o'clock in the evening when he would get off work. And then we would drive around to a couple of streets over and we would pick up his wife. after she got off work.
So he would just drive you around after the classes and...
Well, not immediately after. The classes were maybe like from 2 to 3 or something.
Mm-hmm.
And I would stay there all day long with him.
Oh, wait a second. So your uncle abused you after these classes?
I believe so. There were lots and lots of rooms in
Wow.
this building where he met.
Uh-huh.
I think a lot of people rent out those rooms for various meetings and so forth. And
Mm-hmm.
they have a big dance floor where I took the dance lessons, but people rent that dance floor out for weddings and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And he always had this huge amount of keys that he would carry on his belt. And he had keys for like every single door in that building. And I don't know, I just remember just those keys. It's just a vivid memory in my mind.
Those keys, I can imagine the sound that they make. That's probably a triggering sound for you if someone, dangled keys. And the thing is, I want you to know, you say you believe so. You may not have specific memories, but your body remembers what happened to it.
Right.
And your mind and your psyche, to help you survive it and to cope, will block that out many times. So it's actually very normal for survivors not to remember every incident that occurred to them. I can say the same for myself. I don't remember. There are gaps. So I want you to know that that's normal, and don't question yourself or beat yourself up, when it comes to that.
Okay.
And, you did tell us a little bit, but can you tell us a little bit more about the religion,
Sure.
just for context so we all understand?
Okay, so I have studied up about it in my adult years, and I know that it started in Africa. I didn't know all this at the time, of course.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It started in Africa in the 1600s, and then it went to Cuba through the slave trade.
Oh, wow.
And so eventually it came to America and other countries, and sacrificing animals is a big part of the group that I was, I'm sorry, sacrificing animals is a big part of that religion. The group I was with mainly sacrificed cats.
Oh.
They used a lot of fire and tobacco smoke. The men and even the ladies would smoke cigars, and then they would use a bowl to blow tobacco smoke in people's faces. To this day, I cannot stand any kind of tobacco smoke. I constantly have hot flashes and can only wear sleeveless dresses and tops for the most part, even in winter. When my husband and I get in our vehicle, I feel like I can't breathe until the air conditioner is blowing directly on me. And at night, I have to have the ceiling fan on, plus another floor fan blowing on me.
Wow. You see how your body's holding on to that? Your body's holding on to that trauma. And
yes, I do.
Oh my God. The animal sacrifices, you said usually cats, usually involving fire, you say?
Yes.
Oh, how did you feel at the time when you witnessed that? How old were you the first time you witnessed that?
I'm not positive, but
mm-hmm.
It seems to be, it was probably pretty intense when I was about 5 years old. And I'm just not sure exactly. I took the ballet lessons from ages 4 to 6, and I really believe, like we were talking about, that was a way of grooming me for the Santeria religion. I'm sorry. My mind is wandering a little bit. Are we on the question about, was I forced to stay in this religion?
Oh, I haven't gotten to that. We're just talking about the religion in general, so it's okay. So, it sounds like I can tell that this topic is difficult for you to talk about. And I
Yes, it
completely
is.
understand, and I can tell. So I won't ask you any more detailed questions about that.
Okay. Well,
But
I would like to read what I wrote, though, if that's okay.
oh my gosh, yes. That I was just going to ask you, I was going to still ask you, were you forced to stay in this religion or were you just brainwashed to
Okay.
believe it? Did you believe it yourself at some point?
Okay, here's what I wrote. I said, I feel like I was almost born into the religion. Age 2 was maybe my first experience with it, and possibly younger than that. But at age 14, I was instantly removed from that by my mother when she married my stepfather, even though I don't think she ever knew about it. But as soon as she married my stepfather, that whole lifestyle instantly came to an end for me.
Wow. And that's what I want to get to now. I want to get to, at the age of 14, it seemed like life was turning around for you when your mom married your stepfather,
Right,
and you finally escaped your uncle. But just a
right,
year later, and you had kind of alluded to this earlier, you had to wear a body cast for 10 months due to
right,
surgery from scoliosis.
right.
Oh my gosh, how did that affect your mental health on top of everything that was already going on for you?
Okay, I gotta tell you, Yvonne, you asked excellent questions.
Oh, thank you.
So I'm going to read you my answer to this one.
Okay, okay.
And I really appreciate y'all letting me do that.
Of course. We're all here. We're here to support you.
Okay. I said I was always freaked out at the idea of ever having to go in the hospital. This is my whole childhood. I had pneumonia at age 6 weeks and spent a week in the hospital and almost died. My parents never had health insurance or very little health insurance. So, from the time that my father died, when I was age 2, my Uncle Milton told me that he paid for my hospital bill for my birth, plus for when I had pneumonia.
Mm.
And he told me that I needed to pay him back with sexual favors, which I did. So when I went to have my scoliosis surgery, my mom was already married to my stepdad, one of my favorite people ever. So I was pretty brave through the 10 days of traction before the scoliosis surgery. But the night before the surgery, I burst into tears and wasn't even totally sure why. The nurses let me talk to another patient who was a teenager who had just had the same surgery. I know
Wow.
now that I'm pretty sure that was an emotional black strap, as they call it.
Yes. Yes. That's exactly what that was.
Mm-hmm.
You were flooded. You were flooded with um, all of those emotions that you've had to stuff down all
Right,
your life. The grief from your dad, the abuse, and now you're having this. I'm sure it was a scary thought to have this surgery.
right,
And on top of that, just the fear of, how much pain am I going to be in, and just
right,
knowing that you would have to be, in that cast for so long, that body cast.
right.
I mean, wow. And after this, you say that you go on to basically live your life. And it wasn't until the age of 30 that you decided to go to therapy.
Right.
And what happened within those 15 years? Why did you wait
Okay.
so long?
Okay. Here's what I wrote to that question. I pretty much always had my head in the books during high school. I won a couple of extemporaneous essay contests my senior year in high school. Then I went away to college and sowed a few wild oats. I did manage to get a Bachelor of Business Administration degree at age 23. 6 months later, I met my husband. We married and had 2 children who are now grown and married, and we have 5 grandchildren.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And what was the catalyst that sent you into therapy? What did something happen that you said, now is just the time I have to go to therapy?
Yes, that was when my daughter turned age 2,
Mm-hmm.
and all of the memories started flooding back to me. It was also when Oprah Winfrey and other people started talking about it publicly on TV and so forth.
Mm-hmm. That's something that I can also relate to. Our stories are very similar in a lot of ways.
Right.
That's a lot of people don't understand that adult survivors of childhood trauma, sometimes their body doesn't even allow them to think about the trauma or feel the trauma that happened to them until later in life when they have kids of their own and they become the ages that they were when they were abused. Same thing
Right.
happened to me when my daughter turned 4 years old.
Right.
I lost it, you know,
Mhm.
and now I know why, and now you know why.
Right.
You know it. You knew exactly why. And
Right.
before we get into this hypnotherapist, you know,
Mhm.
my question is, just out of curiosity, why did you opt for hypnotherapy versus psychotherapy at that particular time?
Okay. Here's my written answer. Are you ready?
Ready.
Okay. I said I did not specifically choose hypnotherapy.
Mm.
I just was referred to the hypnotherapist by my doctor at the time. Then I learned that hypnotherapy comes under the umbrella of psychotherapy.
Mhm.
The doctor who referred me to him simply called him a therapist. He had a master's of social work degree.
Okay, so this isn't someone that um, that you had done your own research on and determined if it was a good fit. It was just someone that was referred to you.
Right. Back then, I was quite naive about researching professionals, but
Sure.
the
Yes.
tide is totally turned now,
Yes.
and yeah.
We learn from those mistakes, don't we? We definitely
Oh,
do.
yes.
Because unbelievably, guys, you're not going to believe this. This hypnotherapist began drugging and abusing you while you were under
Yes.
his care.
Yes.
We know that that type of misconduct occurs in every profession, but having a therapist betray you is incredibly traumatizing. It makes you question ever wanting to seek help again, I can imagine.
Right.
How was your professional relationship in the beginning when you first started with him?
He was very professional in the beginning. I was always impressed by the posters I would see posted around the mental health clinic where he worked. The posters talked about the workshops he conducted for other therapists about multiple personality disorder, and that is what he diagnosed me with at the time.
Oh, okay.
It's, nowadays it's called dissociative identity
DID.
disorder.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I have been diagnosed with all kinds of things over the years, which later professionals realized were not the right diagnosis. But
Sure.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
he considered himself a guru when it came to multiple personalities.
Okay. And so that's what he was basically telling you. You have multiple personalities and you need to see him for that.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
I,
Okay.
yeah. Did you ever get the creepy vibe from this guy at all?
Yes, I did.
Did you?
Here's what I wrote. I said, I'm not sure I thought of them as creep vibes, but when I first started seeing him, he diagnosed me with MPD/DID, like I said, multiple personalities/dissociative identity disorder. And he had a group he led for people with that same diagnosis. One day, he told the group, yes, I know there's a lot of controversy about whether MPD/DID actually exists. But hey, at least we don't believe in satanic ritual abuse. He went on to say that maybe someday he would lead a group for people who believed they were abducted by aliens.
Okay. Yeah, that's a bit off-putting
Yeah.
to say the least. I mean, when did you suspect that something was actually happening during your sessions? How long had you been seeing him?
It was probably the last 5 years of that 10-year stretch. What I started to see was Just before, he would put me into hypnosis, hypnotic trance, as I call it. He would have this little syringe, like this kind of syringe that you get a shot with.
Mm-hmm.
And he would pull it out. It would have no needle on it, and it would be empty. And he told me that some of his clients found it helpful for him to just press that syringe against their arm and pretend like he was giving them a shot.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And then, not too long ago, I started remembering that not only did he do that, but he even had tourniquets. Little rubber band things that they put on your arm when they draw your blood and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
I specifically remember that he had a white tourniquet that he would use on my arm after I started going under. And I did wake up one time and saw that and told him to get rid of it.
Really? You woke up with like an IV type thing situation going on?
I don't think it was an IV. I don't know. I think it was just things that he would put into the syringe and inject into me.
Wow. I mean, let's be honest, he could have given it to you by mouth. If you
Right.
if
And
you
I
were
think
under,
he did too.
yeah, I mean, if you were under, he could have coaxed you to drink whatever he was giving you, or if it was in that
Yes.
syringe, just bloop, put it right in your mouth and you wouldn't even know the difference.
Right. And I know that some of those date rape drugs can be slipped to people.
Yes.
And they have no taste, no smell, or anything. He used to give me cups of water to drink in his office. And he used to ask me to bring in cookies for his other clients, which I did. I felt kind of obligated because he would give me a discount rate on my psychotherapy with him. So I brought in cookies, and I believe that he probably used some of those cookies to also slip drugs in.
Probably. I mean, I've never heard of a therapist ever asking one of their clients to bring in snacks for their other clients. That's,
Right.
and that's a grooming technique also.
Right.
Hey, you're a special client to me. I'm giving you a discount. You bring cookies for everybody. You have to stay around because who else is going to bring cookies if you don't?
Right.
I can only imagine how violating that must have felt. And how long did the abuse last the total time?
The number of years?
Yes.
I believe it was about 5.
Wow.
I will get more into that and some questions coming up.
Sure. The next question, did you press charges against him?
Hold on. Somehow I have some other questions.
Oh, did I mix up my things?
Oh,
I'm sorry. That's totally possible. Oh no, you know what? I asked the last question that I had was how long did the abuse last?
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'm getting myself confused. But if I could, I'd like to go back and read
Yes.
what I wrote.
Yes, of course.
It's a little bit different than what I just said. So what I wrote down is that I went to the library one day and checked out a book called You Must Be Dreaming by Barbara Noel. She saw her psychiatrist for 18 years until one day she woke up in his office with him on top of her. A true story. When she tried to take it to his licensing board and to a lawyer, people kept telling her, including the psychiatrist, that she had to have been dreaming. She must have dreamed that because that could have never happened. And he was some kind of president of some kind of psychiatric association or something like that. So
Wow.
I had checked that book out from the library. I took it in and showed my, I was going to say psychotherapist, my hypnotherapist / psychotherapist.
Mm-hmm.
He had no response, but he did start pushing me away at that time. I was starting to see weird things in his office, such as a video camera on a tripod set up and pointed toward client's sofa.
So there's video.
Well, that's another thing that's really hard for me to process right now. He tried to tell me that he never did videos of me because he claimed that the only reason he did them for some people was because they would have trouble remembering what they said under hypnosis. And he claimed that I never had that problem. But actually,
Wow.
I definitely did have that problem, and he absolutely knew it.
Wow. And see, that's a red flag if you have a professional, I've got to say, I mean, I'm not a therapist. I'm not a licensed therapist. And I could be totally wrong here, but I can't imagine a therapist ever, ever, ever recording a session ever. That's why they take notes. That's why they take notes so they can remind the patient. Yeah, and to say, "Oh, I only did it for some people and not you," but you saw the tripod. You saw the camera.
Right.
Wow. And so that just must be a whole other thing. You're like, is there this video out there about this?
Right. And I'll probably never know if there is or not.
No. So my question after how long did the abuse last was, did you press charges against him? And I take it that maybe you didn't.
Okay, let me finish what I wrote here for the question before that. Okay, I said, yeah, it lasted 10 years. He used to tell me things such as his opinion that I would not be able to function after my mom passed away. My mom was 40 years older than me. When she was diagnosed with cancer in 2002, he made the prediction that she would not live until the end of that year. She actually lived for 4 more years after that. However, it was kind of interesting that his adult son was killed in a car accident a few short months after he made that statement to me.
Mm.
After his son was killed, I believe he got heavily involved in drugs and alcohol. And that's when all those strange things started happening, like the video camera and those kind of things.
Wow.
Okay.
Okay.
And so now I can move on to that next one.
Yeah.
Did I ever press charges against him? No, I did not, but I did file a complaint with his licensing board. I did not feel strong enough to try to go to a lawyer about it until about 3 years later. And at that time, the statute of limitations had run out for my state.
Yeah.
But one of the reasons I filed a complaint with this licensing board, I probably would have never thought of even doing that.
Mm-hmm.
He's the one that actually brought it up, if you can believe it.
What?
Yeah. So one of the ways he groomed me, I believe, as I'm starting to understand grooming better lately, is that he decided that we should do arm wrestling in his office. So I would be sitting on his sofa before hypnosis, and I would have a sofa, a square pillow on my lap, and he talked me into doing this arm wrestling with him. And then he made the comment one day after a few times, he said, yeah, I can just imagine you going to my licensing board and telling them that you and I were arm wrestling and that the pillow fell on the floor. And then all of a sudden, I was touching you in inappropriate ways.
He said
and
that?
I did not know what to say. I didn't really say anything.
What could you say? I mean,
But that was definitely the point where I started looking into filing a complaint with this licensing board.
and you stopped seeing him and you did file the complaint. Whatever happened of the complaint, do you know?
Okay, they paid very close attention to me. They took it with absolute seriousness, which I was kind of surprised because I wasn't used to people listening to me in life, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
And he was thoroughly investigated. And at first they made him, I can't think of the term, but
Probation.
he was not able to practice. Huh?
Was he on probation, or did his license get pulled, revoked?
Well, okay. He was on suspension. Okay, it took a year to, because they said that they were backed up. It took a year to get into the system before it came up for a hearing. At the hearing, they decided that his license needed to be revoked for 1 year. I mean, not revoked, I'm sorry, suspended.
For 1 year?
1 year. And they told him that he needed to have a physical exam and a mental health exam and submit those results to the board. Well, he came up with excuse after excuse as to why he couldn't have those done. Mostly, he claimed that it had to do with his insurance, that they wouldn't pay for them. I would imagine that insurance doesn't pay for that kind of stuff. I don't know. But I imagine they wanted him to see their doctors instead of some buddy of his or something,
Yeah, I would hope.
But anyway, so after a year that he had been on suspension, it came back up. And he was about 45 minutes to an hour late to that hearing. And he was always 45 to an hour late to our sessions.
So unprofessional.
And so they decided to, they asked him, do you have your medical exam and your psychiatric exam results to give to us? And he said no. He was still having trouble with the insurance. So they told him, I think they gave him a few more weeks or something. I don't know. But anyway, so it's a long story.
Yeah.
But this meeting was held in a hotel on a Saturday in a conference room. And I did not have a car at that time. So my sister had driven me to that hearing. And then my sister had turned the control button off on her cell phone, the power button. So when I got finished, I wasn't able to get a hold of her.
Oh no.
And I finally got a hold of her. But during that time, this hypnotherapist had stuck around in the lobby after all the other people had left from his board. And he finally approached me. I was there probably maybe 30 minutes after it ended. He finally approached me and he asked me what it was that I wanted from him. And I told him I basically wanted the same thing from him that his licensing board wanted. So then somehow we got into a conversation, and then eventually my sister showed up, and as soon as she showed up, I took off. And that was the last time I saw him.
Wow.
So I was told by the investigator for the licensing board that as soon as they found out what he did at that hotel where he stayed after and, kind of harassed me, I guess you could say, he was given a choice. Well, I'm sorry, he was not given a choice. He went to see his attorney, and his attorney told him that at that point, he had no other choice but to surrender his license. And so he did that.
So eventually his license was surrendered.
Yes.
Good. So he's not out doing this anymore.
Correct.
Thank God for that.
Yes.
My God, how has this experience affected your trust in other professionals? How have you been able to navigate through that with that in your history?
Yeah. Well, I will tell you that I'm quite hypervigilant when it comes to other professionals' stays. And I have actually seen quite a few counselors over the years since then. And some of them, as soon as I told them about the experience with the hypnotherapist, they decided they didn't want to see me anymore.
What? What?
They were, I think, afraid that I would do the same thing to them. Like I was just a troublemaker out there to take people's licenses away.
Oh, I'm sorry. That pisses me off.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And that's one of the reasons why I was so hesitant to file a lawsuit, because I have heard that once you file a lawsuit against like a medical professional, that word gets around and the other professionals won't see you.
Yeah, you get blacklisted somehow. I'm sure there's a thing with that.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. How did this experience hinder your romantic relationships? Especially with your husband. How did gosh, how did he react?
Okay. I said in my writing here, I said absolutely it affected my romantic relationship with my husband. The hypnotherapist kept telling me that my husband was a child molester, and he had me believing it too.
What?
Yeah. He insisted that I call Child Protective Services over and over and over again, which I did, I'm embarrassed to say, but he never called them himself.
Wow.
My husband was thoroughly investigated by CPS, Child Protective Services, and the local courts, and he always came up as non-guilty.
Is that the end of your answer? I just don't want to interrupt you before
it is for that one.
Oh my gosh. I'm stunned right now.
But that story kind of continues into this next answer.
Yes, well, let's continue. And the next question was, did you have a significant other? And obviously, yes, you had your husband.
Right. Yes, I said definitely my husband. Since the day I met my husband in 1984, I have never been involved with another man, at least not intentionally. Okay.
Yes.
When I would try to stop therapy with my hypnotherapist, he would call me and talk me into seeing him again. He tried to tell me that it was totally normal for a client to be completely dependent on the therapist. He even claimed that it was the only way for therapy to work.
Is that the end of your answer?
That's the end for that one.
Okay. I'm sorry, but your husband was wrong. I know he had very good intentions.
Wait. What are you saying about my husband?
Did your husband say that it's a good thing that because clients are supposed to depend on their therapist, they're supposed to?
Oh, no. The therapist told me that.
Oh gosh. Okay, that makes more sense. No wonder. No, that makes more sense. My apologies. You're like, what did you say about my husband? Sorry about that misunderstanding. Okay. So the hypnotherapist. Okay, no, that makes sense that the hypnotherapist would tell you that because that was part of the grooming part of it. And so, how has this experience changed your life, Carolyn?
Okay, here's what I wrote. I said, sometimes I get down when I think about how much living I have missed out on and wishing I could be so much further along than I am right now. But I know that my life is in God's hands and I just need to trust him. And then I wrote down a couple of scriptures, if I can share those. One of them.
Yeah, if you don't mind only sharing one just for time.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. Titus 2:3-5, teach the older women to be reverent in the way they live, not to be slanderers or addicted to much wine, but to teach what is good. Then they can urge the younger women to love their husbands and children, to be self-controlled and pure, to be busy at home, to be kind, and to be subject to their husbands, so that no one will malign the word of God. That's it for that.
Wow. And do you want to elaborate on that a little bit? That's how you feel that the experience has changed your life? That's what you go to express that?
Pretty much. I mean, my thoughts are kind of all over the place these days as to what my calling in life is supposed to be.
Sure.
And things like that. Why God put me on this earth. But I've always wanted to write books. I know you read a book, and I really admire you for that.
Thank you.
And I'm getting ready to buy a copy of that book.
Wonderful. Can't wait.
And, I kind of thought, well, maybe I'll do some public speaking someday as well. So here I am on your podcast.
This is wonderful.
I never thought it would be this soon.
I know. You see how you kind of create. I believe that we're creators, right? We create our destiny, we create our future. And just by you putting it out in the universe that you want to do this, look, see, now you're doing it. That's because this
That's true.
could be your true calling. And
Right.
so in 2007, you reunited with your husband for the second time. And we won't go through all of these questions just because you actually did answer a lot of them already when we were talking a little bit earlier. But you married each other twice, right? I love this
Okay.
story.
We married each other 3 times, actually.
3 times, okay.
Yeah, I'm kind of embarrassed to say that. My husband loves to tell the story to everybody. He's an extrovert, very much an extrovert. But let me read what I wrote for that, okay?
Yes, of course, of course.
Okay. So I said, my husband does all of the cooking at our house, and that's because I have a fear of poisoning people. I have always felt like everything in my house is poisonous to other people. I know I mentioned that before.
Yeah.
My husband also handles all the finances in our marriage, and that's because I have a fear of money. I think this is due to how money was handled in the cult that my uncle had me involved in, not to mention he himself.
Yeah.
But I'm just now starting to process these issues in therapy.
That's wonderful that you're starting to process, because it is a process. It's a process to process things. You know, it doesn't happen overnight, you know.
Right.
And I know that I asked you a lot of questions about, you know, your relationship with your husband. And I'm just going to skip down because I think you did a good job of answering the other two. How did you cope with flashbacks or triggers? The 15 years, you know, before you started therapy in your marriage, how did you cope with those in your marriage?
Oh, in my marriage, somehow I didn't get the memo that you wanted me to talk about my marriage here.
Oh, no. That's fine. We can let's skip that. We don't have to talk about anything that you don't want to. And it's very possible, by the way, that I went in and added questions after I sent you. That's very possible because I do that from time to time.
I do have a written answer for that one.
Okay.
If I can read what I wrote.
Sure. Yes.
Okay. I said I did not have my first date until I was a senior in high school. And that was because I think all of the boys in high school thought of me as the girl in the body cast. I was a new kid on the block and, you know, immediately in a body cast my freshman year. So anyway, I'm sure I kept my memories compartmentalized in my mind all those years through a process called dissociation that is very common to many child abuse survivors. So sometimes I would burst into tears while out on a date or something similar, often without even knowing why. Those are called emotional flashbacks, which I still have even to this day. These things took a huge toll on lots of relationships over the years, for sure. But I feel like my husband can connect with me much better because of our similar challenges throughout our lives. Our marriage can still get quite rocky at times, but we both, sorry, it's getting a little dark in here.
It's okay.
But we both know now how to work things out in the long run.
And that's beautiful because that's really the goal, right? Is
Right.
figuring out how to work it all out, you know?
Yes.
And you know, I'm so happy because finally in 2022 you found the right therapist for you. And now you're really on your healing journey.
Right.
And so I want to know what has helped you most in therapy so far. Let's just start there. Now that you have a therapist that you trust, that you believe in.
I'm looking for that question.
Oh, that's at the end. It's pretty much at the end.
Oh, what has helped me most in my current therapy, right?
Yes, that's the one.
All right. Yeah. I wrote a whole page on that in my little journal. Okay. First, I said my husband. I put at the top of the page and underlined that. I knew he would probably be reading this, and I wanted to make sure he saw that. And it's the truth.
Yes.
Okay, and I also said my Christian faith and starting my counseling sessions with prayer at my request. Okay, and then something my therapist has taught me is something called power imagery, which is like using hero type characters from cartoons and so forth to think of them as saving you. I like to use Wonder Woman. I bought myself a Wonder Woman doll that kind of looks like Barbie.
Love it.
And then I also bought some fabric and made myself a Wonder Woman pillowcase. And I sleep very well on that pillow now.
Oh, I love that. That's a great idea.
Yeah, and he tells me that he actually doesn't want me to think of the doll and those things as Wonder Woman. He wants me to think of myself as Wonder Woman.
Yes.
So I'm trying to wrap my head around that.
Yes, but you are Wonder Woman.
Thank you. Okay, and then I went on to say other ideas that I have done are journaling, nurturing my inner child by buying her toys and books appropriate for her age. A book called My Management Workbook for Kids by Samantha Snowden, and watching small children out in public and realizing how sweet and innocent they are. I learned this idea from that workbook called The Courage to Heal. And I also use anatomically correct dolls in therapy at times. I do creative things like you and I were talking about, and I made the male anatomically correct doll myself. And then also things that are helpful or church and Sunday school attendance, and asking my Sunday school class to pray for me, which is they have been wonderful about doing. And then also Facebook support groups for people who have been through similar experiences, and having an excellent therapist.
Yes.
And then also going in with a list of things to discuss in therapy. My therapist tells me I am one of the hardest working clients he has ever had. And also the fact that my doctor and my therapist consult with each other regarding my case. Keeping a gratitude journal and learning about and setting boundaries, including letting go of our adult children and grandchildren. For a long time, I was trying to hold on too tight.
Yeah. I can understand that, but our kids grow up and we have to eventually let them live the lives that they want to live and make their own decisions, and that's definitely important. And I think with your answer, you actually answered all of the questions, that the additional questions. And my last question, and you may have already answered it, is what advice do you have for other survivors who've not yet told their stories?
I want to say to them that I know it can be very scary to think about telling your story when you haven't told anyone, especially. But I would encourage them to journal about it, pray about it, and talk to friends and whoever will listen. I know it's sometimes hard to get people to listen. Maybe they have something traumatic from their past that they haven't dealt with, and I know that for those kind of people, it's especially hard for them to listen to our stories. But I would say just keep persevering and keep pressing on, and try to be an outreach to other people that are going through similar things. And that's why I'm right here doing this.
Well, I love it. And because I believe that when one of us speaks, we speak for all the others that can't speak for themselves. Right. So your story is shared with millions of other people, and you don't even realize it, because that's how trauma is. Trauma isn't unique to us. Trauma is a shared experience that each individual going through it has to process and heal and learn from. And I just have to say, Carolyn, this conversation really has been truly enlightening. And I just want to thank you so much for sharing And I really believe that your testimony here will help many people. And I hope that you're proud of yourself for coming forth.
I am. And I really thank you for giving me this opportunity to tell my story. And I really admire the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much. It's my absolute pleasure. But before we go, I want to remind you to permit yourself to start your healing journey if you're struggling from past trauma. You deserve to heal from old wounds that are perpetuating your agony. You know your truth better than anyone else, and don't let your spouse, family, or friends tell you otherwise. Remember, they weren't there. They don't know. They have no right to say to you, your memories are wrong, or that didn't happen the way that you think it happened. Because that's called minimizing your experience. And that is not a healthy way to support a person who has been through trauma. We don't want to minimize their experiences. That's not the kind of support you need. And you have every right to set those boundaries with that person by refusing to discuss your trauma with them. Anyone who makes you feel unsafe or unsupported, you don't have to tell them your story, because only safe people deserve to hear it. Only the people who are going to support you through it deserve to hear it. And having support and finding a therapist who specializes in your specific trauma is essential. It's so important. I can't really stress that enough. Finding the right therapist can be challenging, but when you find them and you start seeing them, I promise you, if you put in the work, it will be life-changing. And like with anything else, you have to keep an open mind, and you have to remember that nothing changes overnight, and neither will you. Neither will your bad habits. But with practice and encouragement, you can break those habits and reclaim your life. You can do this. You've been through enough, don't you think? It's time to love yourself. Give yourself that permission to tell your story and seek that help that you know that you need and deserve. And with that, I want to thank Carolyn again for joining me, and you for joining me for this episode 16 of Survivor Strong. We will be back in 2 weeks on October 12th at 7 p.m. right here live on Fireside. Remember, you got this. We are all in this together. Until next time.
Thanks, Yvonne.
Thank you, Carolyn. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Good job, Carolyn.
Thank you.
Good job. Well, I'm glad that you didn't hang up. I wanted to talk to you.
Okay.
Wow.
I thought I did just hang up, but then I heard you talking, so I'm here.
No, wow, what a wonderful, wonderful conversation. Your answers were so thought out, and so I so appreciate you really putting in the effort to answer those questions, because you'd be surprised how many people don't do that.
Really?
Yes.
That's the kind of stuff my therapist is always telling me about his other clients.
Yeah, it's like, so yeah, and I can totally get how your therapist would say, like, you're the hardest working client, because I can tell that you are putting in the effort. You're putting in that work that you need to do. And
I try.
I'm proud of you. I'm
Thank
proud of
you.
you. And I want you to be proud of yourself. And I am going to